we will have any support from the Democrat side, which I don't expect, this bill is going to pass, and the country is in better shape. You had your time 4 years ago, and how did that work out for the American people? Not too good. I fully support this bill, and Madam Chairman, I yield the balance of my time.
Reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman wants to talk about grocery prices. Read the room, man. Or better yet, visit a grocery store. Give me a break. Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to bring up H.R. 1974, a short-term continuing resolution that keeps the government funded through April 11th. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment into the record, along with any extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question. And to discuss our proposal, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. McCollum.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the full-year CR. This bill abdicates our constitutional responsibilities to direct funding, and it gives it to Elon Musk and Mr. Trump. It undercuts the separations of powers in our Constitution. This CR cuts $13 billion from domestic priorities that Americans rely on. I'm going to talk specifically about $2.2 billion in reduction to health care. Here's a few examples. $280 million cut from NIH means cuts to research and clinical trials. Fewer lives will be saved. The bill removes congressional directions for CDC funding. That's how we detect and control health threats at home and from abroad. And there's an $891 million reduction to HHS investments. That will lead to more health care workforce shortages. The ramifications of these cuts will be felt everywhere, but especially to the most vulnerable Americans who are already hurting from the illegal cuts Elon Musk is making to healthcare grants and research. $17 million reduction to Indian Health Service facilities, and they're already falling apart. The bill shortchanges our veterans by failing to include $22 billion in advance funding for VA toxic exposure. That jeopardizes the health care of our veterans exposed to burn pits and Agent Orange. And the bill cuts DoD medical research by over $850 million. This will obstruct new cures for cancer and infectious diseases. These just aren't funding cuts. The Republicans are cutting cures and treatments and hopes for healthier American families. And this is before we know what Elon Musk has in store for Social Security, disability, Medicaid, and Medicare. A full-year CR is a disaster, and it does not have to be this way. The American people deserve better. I urge my colleagues to defeat this PQ and bring forward a short-term CR, and let's get to work. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes to my colleague on the Rules Committee from Texas.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady. So here we are again. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle who constantly always talk about the need to support a CR to, quote, keep the lights on, now find themselves in the curious position of not wanting to have the lights on because they don't like what's happening. So they don't want the lights to be on because you've got people in the executive branch who have taken seriously the election mandate that was given to the President of the United States to end the absurdity of nonstop wasteful spending, the ridiculousness of expenditures like $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. Like, that's the kind of stuff that make the American people's head explode. And there are dozens, hundreds of these examples. I could sit here and list. And the fact is, this stuff is getting exposed in real time. The American people are seeing it, and now my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are trying to run from it. That's why they don't like this bill. That's why they want to have a shutdown after all of these years of decrying the possibility of shutdown. You're seeing all of the news today talking about the possibility of a Schumer shutdown. You're talking about, there's news article after news article. The Hill, February 11th, Democrats step up talk about using shutdown as leverage against Donald Trump. Democrat senators who request anonymity said that March 14th deadline may be the best leverage they have. Democrats in Congress see potential shutdown as leverage to counter Trump. U.S. Congress, The Guardian, February 15th. I could insert into the record dozens of these stories because the fact of the matter is the gig is up. Much like the American people were able to see the absolute and rampant corruption in our education system during COVID, when everything was shut down and they were watching their kids and they saw these screens and they said, what on earth are they being taught? And suddenly the American people saw the reality of our broken education system. They saw the fraud that was perpetrated by Anthony Fauci on the American people and shutting down their way of life. And now you've got Democrats who are now being exposed for having continuously funded this largesse and this bureaucracy that is completely indefensible. The American people are tired of having their tax dollars taken and dollars being borrowed by an endless stream of borrowing by this Congress. And now you've got a Congress that is willing to work with the president to stop it, to stand up and say enough. And what are we putting in place? Oh, the horror, a spending freeze? Oh, can you believe it? That the federal government might need to tighten its belt and have a spending freeze? And then my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to bring out these parade of horribles, and somehow that is a massive number of cuts, because only in Washington is that a cut. When you've got a spending freeze and holding basically spending in check from 2024, and we have a bill that, by the way, pulls out earmarks, which are often replete with special wish lists. By the way, that's both sides of the aisle. And we've got a bill here that is going to hold spending in check to allow us to do our job for the fiscal year 26 appropriation cycle between now and September. By the way, it was Republicans who passed 5 appropriations bills off of the House floor last year and 12 appropriations bills out of committee last year. The previous year, it was Republicans who passed 7 off the floor and all 12 out of committee. The Democrat-led Senate passed 0. You want to know why we are where we are right now? It's because our Democratic colleagues in the Senate passed 0 appropriations bills, not 1. So we came in here. Now the Republicans have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And now we're trying to get things moving in the right direction. And our Democrat colleagues don't want to have any part of it. So we're putting forward a common sense measure that, look, I understand why some of my conservative flank fiscal conservatives have concerns about a CR. I don't love CRs. But when you can have a CR that extends spending at 2024 levels for the next 6 months and empowers the president to be able to continue to do what they're doing, shining the light on spending restraint, shining the light on waste so that we can do our job and implement that. And by the way, I'll say that to both sides of the aisle. Both sides of the aisle need to take in that information and implement it when we do appropriations this year. Move spending down, eliminate the waste, try to do something about the fact that in 2019, our entire budget was $4.5 trillion. Today, it is $7 trillion. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have no answer to that besides, magic tax cuts. You could literally confiscate the wealth of the wealthiest 1% of America and not dent what we've got in terms of $36 trillion in debt, when you would kill jobs and destroy the economy in the process. But that's the only answer my colleagues have to $7 trillion in spending. The fact of the matter is this CR is responsible. It's fiscally appropriate. It'll leave the lights on so that the president and Doge and Elon and Russ Voter and OMB can do their job. And I hope that my colleagues on this side of the aisle will support the rule. I yield back.
Gentlelady reserves.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, that was an awful lot of words from the gentleman to announce that he's caving and changing his position and finally supporting a CR. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Moskowitz.
Gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, that's exactly right. It's CR Day on Capitol Hill. And what is going on with Republicans? I mean, President Trump puts out a tweet and says, please, and all of a sudden, just flip-flops. But you know what? Let me do some mean tweets about how you feel about CRs when you're in the minority only. And the first one actually is from the gentleman from Texas. And it says, it's Groundhog Day in the House chamber, all the time, every day. Yet again, spending money we don't have, apparently only when he's in the minority. Another one from a colleague, comparing continuing resolutions to attending a P. Diddy party. In any given year, another colleague says, if Congress raises the debt ceiling, passes a CR, and rams through an omnibus bill, no member of Congress should receive a paycheck. That's awkward for you guys. How many of you are going to give back your paycheck? Another colleague, I've never voted for a CR. You sent me to Congress to cut wasteful spending, and I'm a woman of my word. You can guess who that is. And this one, this is my favorite. What does a CR stand for? It stands for capitulating Republicans, caving Republicans, said by a Republican. And you know what? I'm going to miss the Never CR group. I mean, they were great, but they're breaking up. And it was great to see them live while they were together. They had lots of fans. I'm going to miss them. I mean, they were mostly a boy band, okay? Some of them are going solo. Appears it's only Thomas Massey. But you know what? Something tells me there'll be a reunion, but only when they're in the minority. And to quote Representative Massey, talking about Republicans, I guess deficits only matter when we're in the minority. So listen, go home to your families, turn in your voting cards, give Trump the gavel, because that is what has happened to your entire party. You don't need to be here. He tells you to do something, you jump. And so what's going on in the world? Another representative brought what's going on in the world in the last 30 days. Well, let's see. Egg prices are up. Goods are up. Stock market is down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts, reserve.
Reserve.
Mr. Speaker,
Members are admonished for the second time and reminded to address their remarks to the chair. Thank you.
and thank you,
Gentlelady
Mr.
from
Speaker.
Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that reminder. I appreciate that. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 2 minutes again from to my colleague from the Rules Committee from Texas.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, I appreciate the sudden religion my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have found on spending restraint and the need to cut spending. I look forward to all the proposals that my colleagues will put forward on reducing significant amounts of spending and waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'll look for that press conference they'll no doubt have sometime this week. I would also note that when we talk about continuing resolutions, what my colleague just failed to mention was the fact that literally every single Democrat voted for the CR that we just had in December. Like literally every single Democrat except for one who I think maybe took a present vote. The fact of the matter is, it has nothing to do with that. The fact of the matter is, for those of us who do not like CRs as a general principle, the fact is because Democrats literally wouldn't pass an appropriations bill out of the Senate, we're left doing the cleanup work of trying to figure out how to move forward while we have an administration that isn't at war with its own people. When the previous administration was blatantly disregarding the well-being of the American people, to have wide open borders, letting fentanyl and letting all manners of evil come into our country, leading to the death and destruction of the people that I represent, people like Jocelyn Nungare, who lost her life to the hands of Tren de Aragua, because Joe Biden decided it was more important to let millions of people into this country in violation of our laws, endangering the people. That's why our bill has additional funding for ICE, to make sure that we've got the beds to undo the damage that the Biden regime has carried out on the American people. Those are the actual facts. The fact of the matter is, no, you don't want to have a CR to continue the funding under Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was at war with the American people. Now we have a president and administration that is trying to do the job that they sent him there to do. Secure the border of the United States. Hold back spending, eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, get this economy going again, get the regulations out of the way of the American people, and do the job they want us to do. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady reserve. The chairs of each respective side are advised that the gentlelady from Minnesota has 13 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from Massachusetts has 20 and a half minutes remaining. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, forget about it. I'm not going to respond. I just want to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, the distinguished ranking member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Mr. Meeks.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
The fact of the matter is, Donald Trump's policies are collapsing our economy. Unemployment is rising. The NASDAQ had its worst day since the COVID crash. Millions of dollars in retirement savings have been wiped out in just weeks. And the reason is clear. The Trump administration's reckless tariffs on our allies. To impose these tariffs, Trump declared a made-up national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA. But the law has a safeguard. Any member can force a vote to terminate the emergency. But what happened? Speaker Johnson doesn't want to vote. Why? Because it would force Republicans to go on the record about Trump's tariffs. So instead, Speaker Johnson has rewritten the law in real time. And here's what the rule says, and I quote, "Each day for the remainder of the first session of the 119th Congress shall not constitute a calendar day." What? If you don't think that makes any sense, neither do I. House Republicans are declaring that the days are no longer days and that time has literally stopped. The Speaker is petrified that members of this House will actually have to take a vote on lowering costs on the American people. This is what the American people elected us to do. But now, because it's Donald Trump's tariffs and Republicans would have to take a tough vote, Speaker Johnson is stopping us from voting. If Congress can't act to lower prices, protect retirement savings, and hold the president accountable, what are we even here? What are we doing here? A yes vote on this rule is a vote for Trump's tariffs. A yes vote on this vote, a yes vote is a vote to keep prices high for American families. A yes vote is a vote to block Congress from doing its job to lower costs. If you actually care about lowering costs, you should vote no on this rule. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentlelady from Wisconsin is recognized. Minnesota.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You were close. Real close. But, Mr. Speaker, I just want to point out, Democrats love to claim foul when on Republicans for shutting off national emergencies, but they're cherry-picking the facts. Let's take a look back at when they were in charge in the 117th Congress. They never allowed a vote on terminating the COVID national emergency. Mr. Gosar introduced 2 separate national emergency disapproval resolutions, and Democrats, who were in control at the time, not only shut off consideration of those resolutions without a single vote, they shut them off for the remaining 18 months of the Congress. Even 2 years after the COVID emergency was declared, Democrats still silenced the voices of Republicans who wanted to take a vote. What's that saying again? Rules for thee, but not for me. I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentlelady just conceded that this rule would prevent the House from voting on Trump's tariffs, thereby resulting in the biggest tax increase on middle-class families that we've ever seen. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Mexico, Ms. Stansbury.
The gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes when I'm standing in this chamber, I literally cannot believe my ears. And I have to say that today is one of those days, because as we stand here on the floor today, I am hearing members of the other side of the aisle who said they would never vote for a continuing resolution, that they would never vote to raise the debt, that they would never vote for a bill that extends the debt ceiling, say that we have to pass this bill. And so I literally cannot believe my ears today, because the GOP today is here with a great American bait and switch. So let me explain to you what exactly is going on. Donald Trump spent the weekend calling our colleagues across the aisle, asking them to keep the government open until the end of the fiscal year so that they can get on with their real agenda. And you all know what the real agenda is. The real agenda is that they're dismantling the federal government. They're firing tens of thousands of federal workers, teachers, firefighters, veterans, military, members of our community who are in crisis right now, and they are illegally impounding funds. And meanwhile, my Republican colleagues who said they would never vote for anything like this are saying that they are going to vote for it because on the side, Donald Trump is winking at them, and his people are telling them, don't worry, if you pass this bill, we're going to continue to do all of that illegal activity. And then we can get on to the real work, which is dismantling our basic programs that support our communities. They want to take away your Medicaid. This weekend, Elon Musk said he wants to take away your Social Security. They want to dismantle housing programs. They want to dismantle food assistance programs. They are literally bait and switching the American people and abdicating their fundamental responsibility as representatives of the people, because the people have spoken, my friends, and there are no number of town halls that you can run away from to know that your people in your communities do not support your bait and switch. So I say to my GOP colleagues, do your jobs.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. I want to commend the previous speaker on setting an excellent example on addressing remarks to the chair. Thank you very much. Add to that list now, members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. The gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do want to remind everyone that the people have spoken. They spoke in November. The Republicans are the majority in the House. The Republicans are the majority in the Senate. And they elected President Trump. The people have spoken. And we are talking about, I'd like to bring it back to what we're actually talking about today, and that's the rule in front of us, and we're discussing the rule and the continuing resolution. And as my colleague from Texas mentioned, there was not a single no vote from Democrats for the continuing resolution in December. And they're standing here today willing to shut down the government, not because of anything substantive in the bill, but because they believe that as long as they are acting against the Trump administration, against the elected president and Republicans' agenda, then they must be doing the right thing. Motivation by blind hatred. That is the Democrat Party that we have before us today. And with that, I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this rule contains tariffs, and I don't understand why the gentlelady supports these tariffs. She represents a district with over 50,000 farmers, the second most of any member of Congress. And during the last trade war started by Trump, American farmers lost $27 billion in agricultural exports. It's farmers in the gentlelady's district who are being harmed by these tariffs. So I don't understand why she supports them. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Frost.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think it's interesting because any time my colleagues want to defend horrible moves by the Trump administration, whether trying to cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, they keep saying, the people have spoken, without realizing that the people are speaking. That's why they continue to cancel their town halls, because they don't want to hear what the people are saying right now. Costs are at an all-time high. I came down here to tell people that if you're struggling to afford food, you can't pay your rent, the medical bills are stacking up, this bill will make your life worse. Why? To give tax cuts to billionaires and big corporations. This bill sets up major cuts to Medicaid, which 60,000 children in my district rely on for health care. Cuts to Medicare, steals from veterans, ripping away benefits, steals from working people and families, gives even more unchecked power to President Elon Musk and Doge. And recently, Musk said that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. So every vote in favor of this bill endorses those words. You vote for this, go to your constituents and be loud and proud. Tell them that the program that they've paid into and worked on their entire life so they can retire with dignity is a Ponzi scheme. Oh wait, Republicans have been told by their leadership to stop doing town halls. Why? Because the people are pissed off. They're scared. Many have been sold this BS lie that if we just give all the power to billionaires like Elon Musk, we'll all be okay. But I got breaking news for you. The billionaires have always had immense power in this country, and it hasn't worked out for us. I'm opposing today's rule so we can stop the House from voting on the Republican Party spending bill that works to cut Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, veterans benefits, and school lunches. all in favor of the ultra-rich. I know what it's like to not be able to pay for housing, to go into debt just to survive. We're not in this because people have lived beyond their means, but because we've been denied the means to live. So vote no on this rule, and I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is just another example of how talking points are written before they actually read the bill, because this is about a government shutdown, plain and simple. We have to have the rule to pass the CR so that we can avoid government shutdown. I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, this is a rule to protect tariffs. I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Ramirez.
The gentlelady is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this is about the rule so that we can get to this continuing resolution, or so-called continuing resolution. But let me tell you what continuing resolutions are. They give Congress time to negotiate budget bills in the interest of the American people. Let me be very clear. That is not what Republicans want to do here. They're proposing we skip budget negotiations and we give the Musk-Trump administration a slush fund. Their actions prove that they have more respect for their billionaire bosses than they do for the Constitution. They are more willing to hand over their power to Trump and Musk than they are to defend the power of the people, and they're more committed to enabling a bully than to stand up for their constituents. And that is what Trump and Musk are. They're bullies who use intimidation and retribution to get what they want. And Musk, or, Trump under Musk, as my colleague said, they want it all. They want to disregard the law. They want to dismantle the agencies that serve the American people, and they want to destroy the programs and the services that Americans rely on. Bottom line, Republicans are using a shutdown to bully us into giving Trump a blank check. No guardrails, folks, and 6 months to plunge us into further chaos. Yes, if we are in chaos, it's your fault. You control the House, you control the Senate, and you have your guy in the White House. So let me be honest, I will not be bullied. The full-year slush fund CR they call is the red line, and I call my colleagues to vote no on the rule and on the Republicans' slush fund CR. I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the House Appropriations Committee worked in good faith throughout the FY25 process, and it was the Democrats that weaponized this process, holding up negotiations on demands that were completely unrelated to funding. If my colleagues choose a Democrat shutdown simply because they hate Donald Trump and his administration, they are showing they have still learned nothing from the results of last year's elections. I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Members are again reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the president. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we are opposed to the tariffs and a tax increase on American families. I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, a distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Scanlon.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, House Republicans are trying to avert a funding crisis of their own making by passing a partisan Republican spending bill they drafted behind closed doors. It cuts $13 billion from programs like low-income housing, agricultural inspections, and election security. This bill would allow President Trump and Elon Musk to supercharge their attacks on essential federal programs and workers, including Social Security and the FAA, with no input from Congress. I want to highlight how this bill impacts our nation's veterans, particularly in light of the administration's recent actions. Due to the success of the PACT Act, more veterans than ever before have enrolled in VA care, and we should celebrate that success. Instead, this bill reneges on a commitment of $23 billion in health care funding for veterans who were exposed to burn pits and Agent Orange. It also fails to guarantee essential programs within the Veterans Health Administration. Programs like homelessness assistance, mental health care, rural health initiatives, opioid and substance abuse treatment, oncology services, and caregiver support are left undefined and therefore subject to cuts or elimination by DOJ or Trump. This isn't an oversight. Our Republican colleagues are supporting this bill because it allows Musk to eliminate more programs without congressional approval. Look, in just 6 weeks, over 6,000 veterans have been fired from the VA and other federal programs. Veterans comprise 30% of our federal workforce. They're among the hardest working, most patriotic employees in our country. But Trump has allowed Elon Musk and Doge to fire thousands of them without cause. And more jobs are on the chopping block, 80,000 at the VA, tens of thousands at the IRS, 7,000 at Social Security. When Doge destroys federal programs, it's not just cutting essential services for American families, it's also firing veterans. Between deep VA cuts, eliminating funding for veterans' health care, and job cuts that disproportionately hit veterans, it appears that the Trump White House has declared war on veterans. Our veterans and their families deserve better than this. I urge my colleagues to reject this travesty of a bill and instead pass the clean CR offered by the ranking member on appropriations. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman
No
from
speakers?
Massachusetts is recognized.
No speakers? Okay. Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Holmes Norton.
The gentlelady from the District of Columbia is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank my friend for yielding. I strongly oppose this rule and the full-year funding resolution. The CR is an act of fiscal sabotage against D.C. and is an abuse of power over a disenfranchised jurisdiction. The consequences be damned. For the last 20 years, D.C. has been able to operate under the local budget enacted by D.C. for the next fiscal year for the duration of every CR, including full-year CRs and the first 2 fiscal year 2025 CRs. The CR under consideration does not allow D.C. to do so. Indeed, the CR effectively repeals the fiscal year 2025 local budget enacted by D.C., which D.C. has been operating under for the last 6 months, and restores the fiscal year 2024 local budget enacted by D.C., which D.C. stopped operating under 6 months ago. This unprecedented budget substitution will result in an immediate cut of more than $1 billion from D.C.'s $21 billion budget. This cut will likely force D.C. to immediately terminate programs that lay off or furlough police officers, firefighters, other first responders, and teachers. This cut does not save the federal government any money because D.C.'s local budget consists entirely of locally raised revenues such as taxes and fees. The CR also fails to exempt D.C. from a federal government shutdown in fiscal year 2026. Since the 2013 federal budget shutdown, Congress has exempted D.C. from federal government shutdowns because Congress recognized that shutting down a city of more than 700,000 people was harmful to the operations of both D.C. and the federal government. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a memorandum from D.C. Mayor Miriam Bowser's office detailing the impact of this CR on D.C. I urge members to vote no. I yield back.
Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman from Massachusetts. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized. Reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Still no speaker? Okay. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Goldman.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
All right, thank you very much to the ranking member for yielding. I rise today in strong opposition to the Republicans' partisan sham of a government funding bill, which is nothing more than a blank canvas for Donald Trump and Elon Musk to continue their smashing and looting of our federal government. There are too many things that are wrong with this bill to mention in just 2 minutes, including cuts to safety net programs for housing, food, veterans, law enforcement, as well as essential community projects for every district in the country. But what's really shocking is that Republicans rejected any and all input from Democrats, even though they need Democratic votes to pass this bill in the Senate. If you want to go it alone, then go it alone. But you can't blame anyone but yourselves when it fails. If the government shuts down with a Republican House, Republican Senate, and Republican President, it will be solely because the Republicans have moved forward with a terrible partisan take-it-or-leave-it bill. In November, the clear number one issue on voters' minds was the economy and the cost of living. But since he has taken over, President Trump has increased costs significantly and tanked the economy. But it gets even worse. The president has not only failed to keep his promise to help working Americans, but he has enlisted a corrupt, unelected billionaire to slash essential programs that hundreds of millions of Americans depend on. Elon Musk isn't cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. He doesn't even know what he's cutting. And unlike regular appropriations bills, this bill does not include the usual language to fund specific programs. And what that means is that Elon Musk has unfettered discretion to cut whatever he wants. You don't need to take my word for it. The House Freedom Caucus issued a press release supporting this bill because of that very reality. With this bill, Republicans are handing the power of the purse to Congress and not working with Democrats. We continue to stand ready to work together, but this bill does not do that. And I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady is recognized.
Reserved.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Can I inquire in the time, Mr. Speaker?
Massachusetts has 5.5 minutes.
Okay. And the gentlelady has no speakers? So, okay, all right. I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, a distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Ledger Fernandez.
Gentlelady from New Mexico is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, Americans across the country are angry about Elon Musk illegally firing employees and freezing federal funds. Rather than stand up to Musk, Republicans are giving him the power to shut down the government programs Musk doesn't like. Remember, just last night, Musk said he wants to eliminate the big programs like Social Security and Medicare. Musk also wants to fire thousands of VA employees. This bill cuts $22.8 billion for veterans care. It cuts housing. It cuts programs that protect our food supply so we can bring down the cost of eggs. This rule also endorses Trump's tariffs under the guise of a national emergency. Yesterday, Trump's tariffs caused the markets to plummet, taking Americans' retirement savings with them. That's the real national emergency. A vote for this rule is a vote for Trump's tariffs. Is that why Republicans are hiding from their constituents? Because they're backing unpopular tariffs that will cost the average family $2,000 a year? Or maybe they're hiding because this funding bill cuts $15 billion from community projects. We're losing first responder and water infrastructure projects in New Mexico. Republicans are also defunding the police in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, in Representative Bresnahan's district. And how about eliminating the water project in Lehigh County in Representative McKenzie's district? Just to name a few of the many projects that are being gutted in Republican and Democratic districts alike. This is not a clean CR. It's as dirty as it gets. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am prepared to close.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentlelady has 10 minutes left remaining, and the gentleman from Massachusetts has 3.5 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, the Speaker Emerita, Ms. Pelosi.
The Speaker Emeritus from California is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding and for his extraordinary leadership. Mr. Speaker, today Republicans will vote to pass a continuing resolution that hollows out our nation's commitment to the health, education, economic security of America's working families. Instead of working constructively in a bipartisan way to meet the needs of the American people, Republicans are trying to starve the domestic budget with a partisan bill, and I'm going to focus on veterans here, that cuts nearly $23 billion in veterans' benefits, in addition to slashing even more money from health care and affordable housing. Indeed, the Republican CR is a betrayal of our nation, America's veterans, with devastating cuts to initiatives that care for our veterans exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances. Our nation's sacred promise is just as the military says, on the battlefield we leave no soldier behind, and when they come home, we leave no veteran behind. With this bill, Republicans have broken that promise. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this betrayal of our veterans and urge my colleagues, Republican colleagues, to join Democrats at the negotiating table to get us serious about the people's business. Vote no. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentlelady from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Is the gentlelady prepared to close, Mr. Speaker? Okay. I'm sorry.
Yes.
We haven't heard a speaker in a long time. I just wasn't sure. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, if you vote for this rule, you own the tariffs. Republicans snuck in a provision that blocks this House from voting on resolutions that could end the tariffs. They know these tariffs will cost families an extra $1,200 a year, and they're scared to vote for them. So instead of letting Congress do its job, they're shutting down the debate. They're hiding, and they're shielding themselves from any accountability. And do you know who's going to feel the pain, Mr. Speaker? It's working families, it's small businesses who are already struggling with high costs. It's farmers who are already the victim of retaliatory tariffs. Meanwhile, the stock market was in a free fall yesterday, and today it's going down again. Retirement accounts have taken a huge hit. Ontario is already hitting us with a 25% electricity surcharge, hurting families in Minnesota. In fact, I saw a breaking news story this morning that Trump's now escalating his trade war by doubling tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. So he and his enablers are pushing forward, full steam ahead, into a possible recession with no regard for the chaos he's causing in this country. That's why House Democrats, led by Ranking Member Meeks, introduced resolutions to end Trump's devastating tariffs. According to the National Emergencies Act, these resolutions should be fast-tracked for a vote on the House floor. Republicans are using this rule to shut them down. And I'd love to hear them explain to their constituents why they're standing by while prices are skyrocketing. But Republicans are scared of their constituents too, hiding in their offices instead of holding town halls. So let me be perfectly clear. If your representative votes for this rule, they're voting to ratify the Trump tariffs. They're hoping you won't notice while they let our economy burn. That's not leadership, that's cowardice. And a vote against this CR is not a vote to shut down the government. We have offered a 1-month CR to fund the government while appropriators finish the budget process. Instead of giving up on it
Gentleman's time has expired.
Check to Trump and Musk. Vote no on this.
Gentleman yields back. And the gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And now that we've finished listening to the Democrats' talking points, the same talking points that they use over and over and over to mislead the American people and demonize Republicans and demonize President Trump, I will actually focus on what we're talking about today and what is actually in front of the body. And that's the rule to deal with the CR and 2 other bills. And even with the additional funding for veterans and the FAA and families in this bill, it will cost less than last year. not by gutting programs, as my Democrat colleagues have so wrongfully claimed, but by removing projects from the FY24 bill so that they are not double funding projects that have already received funds in in FY24. My Democrat colleagues must be confused because I certainly would not want to be accused of calling them liars. This bill upholds the responsibility of our veterans and ensures full funding for the health care services and benefits. It includes the largest pay raise for junior enlisted troops in over 40 years. It supports federal wildland firefighters. It increases funding for air traffic controller priorities. It does not cut grants for law enforcement. It does not cut spending on family assistance programs. In fact, it increases spending for WIC by more than $500 million. And it includes an additional $6 billion for the Toxic Exposure Fund to treat veterans who have experienced service-related exposure to toxic substances. This bill can increase spending on these critical needs by making sure that we are not double funding existing programs. It is really that simple. Avoiding government shutdowns ensures that the administration can continue to identify waste, fraud, and abuse. It also allows ICE to continue deporting criminal migrants. This clean CR will allow us to focus on one big, beautiful reconciliation bill. Furthermore, this rule provides a way for us to continue to remove waste, fraud, and abuse right now by extending the time to prosecute those who committed unemployment insurance fraud during the COVID CARES programming. I would ask my Democrat colleagues to spare us the speeches about President Trump and the Department of Government Efficiency trimming some of the bloated bureaucracy from our federal departments. They are about to vote against a continuing resolution in the hopes of shutting our government down and sending every single federal employee home without a paycheck. Maybe my Democrat colleagues just don't think DOGE is going far enough. The truth is that there are more than 25,000 federal employees in the state of Massachusetts whose paycheck will be put on an indefinite hold if the government shuts down. And that's what my Democrat colleagues are going to vote for. My Democrat colleagues keep complaining how unfair this CR is to the D.C. residents. But there are over 160,000 federal employees in the District of Columbia, which quite frankly is more than there should be. But you are going to make every one of their paychecks go away if you succeed in shutting the government down. I thank my colleagues, Mr. Carey and Mr. Cole and Mr. Smith, for introducing these thoughtful pieces of legislation, and I encourage every single one of my colleagues to vote for this nonpartisan continuing resolution to keep our government fully funded and hold fraudsters accountable. A no vote, and I'll make it very clear, a no vote on this rule is actually a no vote to shut down government. With that, Mr. Speaker, I support the rule and the underlying legislation and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The question
on the resolution.
Gentlewoman moves the previous question. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays, please.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring the vote for yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of adoption of a resolution if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote. Okay, so okay. On this vote, the yeas are 216, the nays 212. The previous question is not ordered. I thought so. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 216, the nays are 214. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I always have to get it. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I offer a resolution constituting a question of the privileges of the House.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 212, resolved that the Senate Joint Resolution 3 entitled, "A Joint Resolution Providing for Congressional Disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Internal Revenue Service relating to gross proceeds reporting by brokers that regularly provide services effectuating digital asset sales, in the opinion of this House, contravenes the first clause of the 7th section of the first article of the Constitution of the United States and is an infringement of the privileges of this House, and that such joint resolution be respectfully returned to the Senate with a message communicating this resolution."
The resolution presents a question of the privileges of the House. Without objection, the resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 211, I call up the bill H.R. 1156, the Pandemic Unemployment Fraud Enforcement Act, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 2, H.R. 1156, a bill to amend the CARES Act to extend the statute of limitations for fraud under certain unemployment programs and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 211, the amendment in the nature of substitute recommended by the Committee on Ways and Means printed in the bill is adopted, and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means or their respective designee. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis, will each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The American people supported President Trump in November because he pledged to eliminate waste and fraud in government. There is no better example of what President Trump is talking about than the rampant fraud the Ways and Means Committee has uncovered in the COVID-era unemployment insurance program. This money was supposed to help workers and their families through a crisis. Instead, it was stolen. It was stolen by fraudsters and criminals. According to government estimates, between 100 and 135 billion of UI benefits were stolen during the pandemic. Outside estimates range as high as 400 billion. That's higher than the economy of my home state of Missouri and about 20 other states. It is the greatest theft of tax dollars in U.S. history. So far, the government has only recovered about $5 billion. As we stand here, there are over 157,000 open UI fraud hotline complaints and more than 1,600 ongoing fraud investigations. This is a must-pass bill. The statute of limitations for these investigations start to run out in 16 days on March 27th. If we don't extend it, the criminals who stole money from the pockets of taxpayers and continue to do so to this day will get away. The Pandemic Unemployment Fraud Enforcement Act is simple. It doubles the statute of limitations from 5 to 10 years so we can prosecute and recover hundreds of billions of stolen tax dollars. We did this in the 117th Congress when Republicans and Democrats voted unanimously to extend the statute of limitations for fighting fraud in other COVID-era programs plagued by criminal theft. This legislation deserves the same strong bipartisan support. Yet during our markup, not a single Ways and Means Democrat voted for this bill. Let me preview some of the fear-mongering you're going to hear today on this floor. First, committee Democrats will argue that giving law enforcement more time to prosecute fraud will lead to surprise bills or targeting of innocent Americans who accidentally received an overpayment. This is completely false. DOJ is focused on prosecuting sophisticated criminals who maliciously defrauded the government, including international crime rings, online scammers, and gangs that are using tax dollars to illegally purchase firearms and commit crimes. This is not about going after grandma who made a mistake on her form. Anyone making that claim is simply not telling the truth. That isn't happening today, and it won't happen tomorrow. All this bill does is simply extend the investigations ongoing today. Second, Democrats claim that rescinding $5 million to offset the cost of this bill is a bridge too far. This is money sitting over at Department of Labor unused. With over 1,600 open investigations, Democrats should be more concerned about what their constituents and American taxpayers have to lose if this doesn't get done. Third, you will hear complaints about items completely unrelated to this bill, like DOJ, or the streamlining of the federal government to make it work better for the American taxpayer. I understand that my colleagues on the other side may want to use their floor time to discuss those issues, but that is not what the bill in front of us is all about. It is simply about continuing ongoing efforts to recoup tens of billions criminally taken from the American taxpayer. A no vote is a vote to allow these criminals to keep the money they stole from taxpayers. It's a vote to surrender to fraudsters. And it's a vote that says to Americans, we don't care about your hard-earned taxpayer dollars. I urge all of my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Missouri reserves. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to reluctantly oppose H.R. 1156 that would extend the statute of limitations for pandemic unemployment insurance fraud for 5 years. During the pandemic, criminal actors and fraud rings took advantage of overwhelmed state unemployment offices and unqualified contractors to steal billions of dollars from American taxpayers. Like the rest of my Democratic colleagues, I have strongly supported the Department of Labor Inspector General, or OIG, efforts to serve justice and recover taxpayer dollars. We opposed Republican cuts to the OIG budget that slowed their work. Then 2 years ago, when the Inspector General recommended we extend the statute of limitations for specific crimes to allow more time for prosecution of criminal rings, we tried to work with our Republican colleagues on a bill to accomplish that. Why then am I opposing this bill today? Just before this bill was introduced, President Trump illegally fired the very Inspector General who recommended this extension of the statute of limitations and who led the OIG's work to prosecute criminal rings, securing 1,400 convictions and over $1 billion in court-ordered restitution. President Trump also illegally fired 16 other nonpartisan inspectors general, the same officials we depend on to fight fraud and hold agencies accountable. And since that time, we've seen Elon Musk and his dog team sweep through federal agencies, firing experts, demanding access to American citizens' most sensitive identity and financial information, and levying unfounded accusations of fraud, federal program beneficiaries, even at Social Security recipients. 1 in 4 Americans received pandemic unemployment benefits. Many of them unknowingly received modest overpayments, often because of state or contractor errors. For example, Arkansas businesses received specific instructions from the Arkansas Unemployment Office about how their workers should report income on their pandemic unemployment applications. Unfortunately, this guidance was incorrect, resulting in overpayments. Consequently, the Arkansas Unemployment Office applied to the Department of Labor for permission to waive overpayments to employees whose employers gave them incorrect information. These workers did nothing wrong, but still today, the Dodge team falsely claimed these workers defrauded the government and filed criminal charges 10 years after they spent the funds on rent, food to survive, and the pandemic. Extending the statute of limitations without a Senate-confirmed nonpartisan inspector general and without guardrails limiting the extension to serious criminals could put every American who lost their job during the pandemic at risk of harassment and accusations of fraud. Given the false accusations of rampant fraud by federal program beneficiaries, coupled with the administration's stopping enforcement against criminal activity by certain foreign adversaries, any extension of the statute of limitation need guardrails in the law to protect workers who were unemployed during the pandemic. I filed an amendment to limit the extension to cases with an expected recovery of at least $100,000, which is standard practice at the Office of Inspector General right now. I am deeply disappointed that my amendment that would simply codify current practice was not made in order so that I could support the bill. This bill will also cut the Department of Labor's limited budget to support state fraud prevention, including criminal identity verification tools. As unemployment surges across the country due to the Dodge firing of federal employees and contractors, due to the Trump administration's illegal cuts to nonprofits and theft of federal funding, and due to the Trump trade wars, states will need all the help they can get to pay benefits accurately and to protect against the same bad actors that targeted us during the pandemic. Given the failure of this Republican bill to protect the tens of millions of unemployed workers during the pandemic from the Dodge witch hunt, I urge my colleagues to oppose this bill until language is included that ensures that the prosecution focus remains on criminal rings and large-scale fraud rather than overpayments due to state or individual error. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. LaHood, the chairman of the Work and Welfare Subcommittee.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman Smith, for your leadership on this very important topic. I rise in strong support of H.R. 1156, the Pandemic Unemployment Fraud Enforcement Act. This bill extends the statute of limitations for CARES Act unemployment fraud from 5 to 10 years to provide law enforcement agencies with more time to go after the fraudsters and international criminal organizations. Nearly 5 years after the CARES Act was signed into law, we are facing the expiration of the statute of limitations for holding criminals accountable. Congress must act quickly. We cannot retroactively change criminal liability for federal crimes. As chairman of the Work and Welfare Subcommittee, we have done considerable oversight to investigate the size and scope of unemployment fraud throughout the pandemic. GAO estimates between 100 and 135 billion with a B was lost to fraud, yet only 5 billion has been recovered. This February, our subcommittee held a hearing with fraud experts from across the country. One of our witnesses said that as much as 70% of the fraudulent unemployment benefits went to Russian mobsters, Chinese hackers, and Nigerian scammers. A recent DOJ case involved a Pennsylvania man obtaining $59 million in public benefits and laundering the proceeds to China. As a member of the House Select Committee on China, cases like this are deeply concerning to me and confirm our worst fears regarding the attacks on our institutions by hostile nations such as China and the CCP. Witnesses also told us that fraud is continuing to happen. Fraudsters are now targeting the disaster unemployment benefit using stolen identities of California fire victims. The Pandemic Unemployment Fraud Enforcement Act is a common sense bill that doubles the statute of limitations so we can recover hundreds of billions of stolen taxpayer dollars. Prosecuting bad actors has a ripple effect that will deter crime and prevent additional losses to the government and American taxpayers. The DOJ has more than 1,600 open cases, uncharged COVID-19 criminal matters, and the Department of Labor Inspector General has yet to investigate 157,000 UI fraud hotline complaints. This bill is simple. Once the statute of limitation expires, these cases will go cold and criminals will go unpunished. Let me be clear. A vote against this bill is a vote to surrender to fraudsters and criminals. Don't let the criminals and fraudsters win. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Missouri reserves. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I give 4 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Doggett.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, today Republicans offer a truly remarkable answer to unemployment insurance fraud, and that's to make a big cut in those who are already fighting unemployment insurance fraud and abuse. Likely gone will be the resources for providing the states access to databases that they use to prevent fraud by confirming identities. Once again, arithmetic is just simply not a Republican friend. They cut $5 million from anti-fraud efforts that are going on today to produce a savings of $500,000 over a 10-year period, according to the independent, nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, which estimates also that, quote, any additional recoveries from their sorry bill of overpaid benefits would be insignificant. And this rash Republican move comes on top of Elon Musk's slash and burn rampage through our government. Who knows how many civil servants have already been fired whose principal responsibility is to fight fraud. And not only what the fraud that's occurred in the past, but some shyster who's come up with a new approach. as the sponsor of anti-fraud legislation myself, legislation which Mr. Smith has refused to consider to prevent some bilking of Medicaid, I can tell the difference between a real anti-fraud measure and one advanced on behalf of administration extremists who don't believe in unemployment insurance in the first place. This bill's true objective is to penalize working Americans who, through no fault of their own, both lost their jobs during the pandemic and then received mistaken amounts of overpayment thereafter. Now, years later, instead of accepting responsibility for the failure of the first Trump administration to improperly making those overpayments, done first by the Trump administration itself, and in failing to establish safeguards so that there would not be overpayments, Republicans instead are shifting the blame from Trump's wrong to workers, to wrongs that the workers did not commit in the first place. This bill is just another part of the Trump-Musk fake war on waste, fraud, and abuse. Big claims, big claims. No proof of genuine savings. Really all about wrecking programs like unemployment insurance that the extremist Project 2025 said they wanted to eliminate, even though they don't actually help taxpayers. One thing we can be sure of is that with Trump, we have no accountability, no transparency, and no watchdogs. That's why he moved quickly to fire at least 17 inspectors generals in different agencies, including the Department of Labor Inspector General Larry Turner. At the very time he was fired, Mr. Turner received no cause for being fired, of course, because the real cause was they didn't want a watchdog there. He was about fighting fraud. He was prosecuting large, sophisticated criminal rings responsible for stealing hundreds of millions of dollars in other ways. Make no mistake, if they had really wanted to target those who are taking this money unfairly and in a criminal way, they would have taken Mr. Davis' amendment to prioritize those who are doing the most damage. I believe that Trump, Musk, and their House Republican enablers here today are much more interested in brash declarations than in genuine savings. They have made clear that their number one priority in our committee is not unemployment fraud, but more tax breaks for plutocrats by shifting more of the tax burden to working families and irresponsibly increasing by trillions of dollars the size of our national debt. I would urge a rejection of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the President. Gentleman from Illinois reserves. Gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday my colleagues introduced an amendment that would limit prosecution of fraud cases with at least $100,000 in stolen funds. Apparently, Mr. Speaker, Democrats want to give some criminals a get-out-of-jail-free card. Let me give you an example of what that looks like. A woman from Rockford, Iowa, was sentenced to more than a year in prison for receiving $45,000 in unemployment benefits from 8 different states using stolen identities and laundering the proceeds through cryptocurrency. I ask for unanimous consent to submit for the record a September 20th, 22 release from the United States Attorney's Office, Northern District of Iowa, quote, Iowa woman sentenced to federal prison for fraud and money laundering.
Without objection.
A criminal, Mr. Speaker, is a criminal, no matter how much they steal from the American taxpayers. H.R. 1156 is a must-pass bill for anyone interested in enforcing
justified special treatment. And according to the Nonpartisan Fact Coalition, cryptocurrency is becoming attractive to hostile actors like Hamas, who seek ways to sidestep sanctions. The risks are especially severe with decentralized finance platforms, which are enabled to operate outside the traditional regulatory oversight that applies to others. The further note when we talk about fiscal responsibility, this bill, $4 billion added to our national debt They can't even question that. It's like the $8 billion in one of the gifts they gave to the oil industry last week. So $4 billion here and $8 billion there and $4 trillion or so with the Republican tax bill to provide more tax breaks to people like Elon Musk and the people that were there on the front row of the president's inauguration. It adds up. And those Republicans who've been telling us we have a great national security problem with our national debt are so concerned about it that they're going to add trillions of dollars more, and $4 billion is nothing to ignore, which this bill does and does not pay for. We should reject this new Trump special interest legislation that will just result in more corruption in this administration, a loophole that will be exploited by wealthy tax cheats, drug traffickers, and terrorist financiers, and for which there is absolutely no reasonable justification. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president. Gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Miller.
Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman Smith. The IRS's DeFi broker rule is a misguided and overreaching attempt to impose financial reporting requirements, which represents a fundamental misunderstanding of digital assets and its underlying technology. DeFi protocols are not brokers. They don't facilitate transactions like traditional financial institutions, nor can they collect and report user information. DeFi protocols provide infrastructure. Expecting them to track and report user activity is both impractical and misaligned with their core function of what they do. Yet the IRS wants to force software developers, validators, and even everyday users into compliance with regulations that simply don't fit. This is the equivalent of requiring the builders of our interstate highways to report the identity of every driver who uses them. It's unworkable, it's unfair, and it completely misses the mark. This rule would drive U.S. blockchain innovation overseas, killing jobs and stifling economic growth while doing little to increase tax compliance. Congress should lead in crafting clear, workable regulations that protect consumers, ensuring that innovation isn't stifled and compliance remains practical. I urge my colleagues to vote yes and do away with this unworkable rule. I yield back.
The gentleman from Missouri reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Moore.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in strong support of House Joint Resolution 25, which overturns the Biden administration's misguided attempt to impose unworkable reporting requirements on the digital asset industry. In November, the American people sent a very clear message. They were tired of the far-left policies of the Biden administration. They gave President Trump a mandate to turn our country around. Despite this clear mandate and warnings from committees, the Biden administration pressed forward with partisan midnight rulemaking. Last December, the Internal Revenue Service finalized a rule that would require decentralized platforms to facilitate digital asset transactions to report user data to the IRS. User data. While the Biden administration claimed this rule was about improving tax compliance, in reality it goes far beyond what Congress ever intended. This rule would place impossible burdens on software developers, threaten American leadership in digital asset innovation, and ultimately drive entrepreneurs and investors overseas. We cannot continue the Biden-era policies that crush innovation and put American companies at a disadvantage. That's why I support House Joint Resolution 25, which repeals this harmful IRS rule and allows Congress to develop a targeted, common-sense framework that protects both consumer privacy and American innovation. This resolution is backed by over 117 industry leaders, including the Blockchain Association, Coinbase, and the Crypto Council for Innovation. Empowering innovation, not stifling it, is key to keeping America competitive. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to stand with American entrepreneurs and innovators by supporting House Joint Resolution 25. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Missouri reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests. So I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized. Pardon me. The gentleman from Missouri is ready to close.
Yes.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
I appreciate the heartfelt arguments from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. But at the end of the day, it's hard for me to overcome the fact that this bill would add $4 billion to the deficit solely due to taxpayer noncompliance. If Republicans have a meaningful solution to address this noncompliance, we look forward to working with you on it. But embracing tax cheating by completely throwing these rules out is simply not the answer. And for that reason, I do not support this joint resolution and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this afternoon, we reminded the other chamber that the Constitution says all revenue measures must originate in the House of Representatives. The Senate must have been just so excited about this bipartisan CRA that they couldn't wait another minute. But that's okay. Whether it's the CRA or the budget, guess they will just have to vote again. Mr. Speaker, the repeal of the Biden IRS rule is a victory for common sense. The federal government shouldn't demand decentralized finance platforms used by ordinary Americans to buy and sell cryptocurrency to fill out forms when those platforms don't collect the information needed for the form. Neither the American people nor the IRS are equipped to handle the demands of this unworkable rule. These platforms are not like banks. They're not like security brokers, yet this rule treats them as if they are. In order to justify the burden placed on ordinary people, Mr. Speaker, the Biden IRS stretched and twisted congressional intent to enact regulations designed to cripple the digital asset industry. I urge all of my colleagues to vote for this bill and help dismantle the politically motivated regulations from the last administration. I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 211, the previous question is ordered on the joint resolution. The question is on the engrossment and third reading of the joint resolution. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
Joint resolution providing for congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code of the rules submitted by the Internal Revenue Service relating to gross proceeds reporting by brokers that regularly provide services effectuating digital asset sales.
The question is on passage of the joint resolution. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The joint resolution is passed.
Mr. Speaker,
first the gentleman right.
I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Does the gentleman from Oklahoma, Chairman Cole, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 211, I call up the bill H.R. 1968, a full year continuing appropriations and extension act for 2025, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1968, a bill making further continuing appropriations and other extensions for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2025, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 211, the amendment printed in House Report 11915 is adopted and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, and the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, each control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the measure under consideration.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. I rise today in support of H.R. 1968, the full year Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act of 2025. Today's bill comes about at a critical time for this institution and this nation. As members are well aware, government funding all runs out at midnight on Friday. That means that members are faced with a stark but clear choice. Will they vote in favor of this bill and thereby keep the government open and operating, or will they vote no, thereby affirmatively choosing to shut down the government? This choice is the choice we face today. We are now nearly 5.5 months into the fiscal year 2025. Congress has previously passed 2 short-term continuing resolutions, both of which extended government funding and kept the status quo in place, ensuring the government can remain open. Today's bill is really no different than the CR passed in December. Other than the most essential and critical anomalies, it simply maintains current conditions through the end of the fiscal year. For those who supported the CR in December, you should have no qualms about voting for the same way on today's bill. There are no policy differences, no poison pills, and no reason to vote against keeping the government open and operating. A year-long CR is not how I hoped that FY 2025 appropriations process would end. The Appropriations Committee and the House did their work. Indeed, the committee reported out all 12 appropriations bills by midsummer, and the House passed 5 of those bills, covering over 70% of discretionary spending across the floor by the end of July. Sadly, despite our best efforts, we were unable to come to a final agreement on the full year appropriations bills. Although we were very close on a final dollar figure, my colleagues in the minority made additional demands that would restrict the legitimate authority of the executive in the appropriations process. These are restrictions that the minority would never accept for a Democratic president, nor are they provisions that President Trump would or should sign into law. It is deeply unfortunate and disappointing that the minority chose to make these unreasonable demands. Republicans never left the negotiating table and indeed worked diligently with Democrats to reach a bicameral, bipartisan deal. Sadly, the minority allowed their opposition to the president to cloud their judgment, giving in to a political temper tantrum rather than voting to keep the government open. That truly is the choice before us, Mr. Speaker. Today's bill is a simple, straightforward, continuing resolution, funding the government and keeping it open through September 30th. It maintains the status quo, providing flat funding for the government and including only legitimate anomalies. Importantly, this bill does not contain a single poison pill policy rider. It's a clean CR, fully funding our government. This includes our military and defense needs, and indeed we've accomplished this while also fully funding the Department of Defense, including the largest pay raise for junior enlisted personnel in over 40 years. We're also maintaining funding for other critical functions of government, including border defense, roads, parks, child care, water infrastructure projects, biomedical research, job training, and countless others. I know members have heard some fear-mongering about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. This bill makes no changes to any of these programs, leaving them intact as is, and with the funding they need to operate through the end of the fiscal year. Let me say that again. There are no changes to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, period. Mr. Speaker, the outcome of the fiscal year 2025 appropriations process is not what I wanted, but at the end of the day, it is significantly better than the alternative, a government shutdown. The choice is clear. Either members will vote for this bill and for keeping the government open, or they will vote to shut the government down. I know which option my constituents expect, and I know which I will choose. I urge all my colleagues to do the same. Vote for this bill. Vote to keep the government open and operating. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman reserved. The gentlelady from Connecticut, Ms. Doyle, is recognized to debate the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Lady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am opposed to this one-year continuing resolution. It is not a simple stopgap that keeps the lights on, the doors open. This is Republican leadership handing over the keys of the government and a blank check to Elon Musk and to President Trump. As the White House has said, this bill creates more flexibility for this administration to continue to undermine the Constitution and the countless spending laws by stealing promised investments from American families, children, and businesses, unlawfully dismantling agencies, arbitrarily firing civil servants, and canceling union contracts. Read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7. The power of the purse resides with the Congress and not with the executive, and in fact, the President has no legitimate authority from meddling in the appropriations process. Our colleagues across the aisle have gone to their districts. They witnessed rage from their constituents at these actions. They have been advised by their political consultants not to do town halls altogether. Why bother listening to the American people? It was President Lincoln who said, "Public sentiment is everything, and without it you can do nothing." They do not have public sentiment. So now what we should do? The answer should not be cutting non-defense programs by $15 billion and defense by $3 billion as compared to the Fiscal Responsibility Act agreement in 2025. They are in violation of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. There is an agreement with Senator Schumer, Speaker Johnson. We all voted for it here. But this is a violation, cuts non-defense $15 billion and defense by $3 billion. Why do they want to shortchange defense investments by $3 billion? I ask them. Not only is it bad for our military, there is a reason the Department of Defense has never operated for an entire year under a continuing resolution. And above all, it transfers more power to the administration to shut off and repurpose funding as they see fit. The will of the Congress and the people ignored. Elon Musk and President Trump would be able to fire thousands of employees. Yes, we do not oversee Social Security. That's in the purview of the Ways and Means Committee. However, we do have control over the administration of Social Security. And the President and Elon Musk would be able to fire thousands of employees at the Social Security Administration. Just witness, they're talking about 7,000 positions gone. What does that result in? Office closures, longer wait times, unacceptable backlogs for Americans trying to access their earned benefits. In effect, you remove the staff and the personnel, thereby crippling the agency to be able to do its job and, yes, to provide benefits. And it's nice if you can individually negotiate with the administration on your own to keep your Social Security office open. 47 are on the docket to get closed. If one stays open, why not all 47? The Army Corps of Engineers construction projects would be cut by $1.4 billion, 44%. And President Trump, not the Congress, would determine who gets the funding, what city, state, locality, and how much money that is there. Instead of helping address housing costs, the bill cuts rent subsidies by over $700 million. It leaves landlords to foot the bill or to evict. We will evict more than 32,000 households. This bill breaks promises to veterans. House Republicans wisely proposed $23 billion in advance funding for the Toxic Exposures Fund to care for veterans that were exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, other toxic substances in their own bill. Their bill last summer was in there. We voted for the PACT Act on a bipartisan basis. But that $23 billion in advance funding has now disappeared. It is gone. We do advanced funding here. We do it with veterans programs, others. We do it with the Indian Health Service. We do it for public broadcasting. Why do we not want to do it for veterans' care and their health care and their treatment? Why? If I were a veteran and they said no to my advanced program, and we do advanced program funding, so issues like veterans' medical care doesn't get caught up in the political whims of this organization, of this body. Veterans today have to understand that that $23 billion for them is not there. There is uncertainty about that. And there's no emergency funding in this bill for disaster relief. It abandons American families who have had their lives turned upside down by extreme weather. You know, the funding for the disaster relief runs out in the spring. What about Kentucky that just had a winter storm in February? Families will not be able to get back on their feet and recover. Neither will businesses who have been shut down because of a disaster, a natural disaster. You know, the decisions about investments that we make cannot be entrusted in one single office holder. This Congress must decide, do we have the authority to control spending as we were granted and is laid out in Article 1 of the Constitution? Why? Why would we want to relinquish this, to give this administration, which is already doing massive harm, dismantling agencies, firing people, telling them today they're no longer needed, the chaos and confusion that has been caused by Elon Musk and President Trump? Why would we want to turn over our authority to appropriate bills? I implore my colleagues, join me. Stand up for our constituents against an unelected billionaire, Elon Musk, who was stealing taxpayers' dollars from American families, children, and businesses. Oppose this giveaway to the administration. Pass a short-term CR, which I introduced yesterday, which would take us to April 11th to continue negotiations and pass regular bills. Let us finish the regular bills that we agree on. That would be such an improvement over a full-year continuing resolution. And I would just say to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, a shutdown will be the result of the Republican majority walking away from negotiations. We were that close. They pulled the rug out from under us and said, stop negotiating, because Musk and Trump want to have the control with a full-year continuing resolution. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished member of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Alford of Missouri.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chair. And I just want to preface this by saying how much respect I have for the ranking member and her passionate arguments. Although we don't agree, I do respect her highly. Mr. Speaker, America broke up with the progressive Democrats, but they just can't let it go. And in the words of Glenn Close, they will not be ignored. They're like the ex in the 1987 movie Fatal Attraction. The ex who got dumped and is stuck in a deranged reality, refusing to move on. They're causing chaos, spreading mistruths, and doing everything they can to disrupt what the American people voted for, all because they cannot accept that their big government, open border, America Last agenda is over. We saw it just last week in this very chamber, Mr. Speaker. We see it when we go back home to try to have conversations with our constituents. It's quite simple. House Republicans are here to govern. We are passing a continuing resolution to keep America open for business, freeze wasteful spending, and secure our border. This continuing resolution gives President Trump the time and power to continue draining the swamp and undoing the damage the radical left did to our country for the past 4 long years. And what is the far left doing? Throwing a tantrum. A childish, petulant tantrum full of fear-mongering and gaslighting of the American people, rooting for a shutdown just so that they can point fingers. Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Speaker. It's not going to work. We're not falling for it. We're not playing this game. This will be a Schumer shutdown when it gets to the Senate, if that happens. The American people chose secure borders, a secure economy, secure neighborhoods, and an America First agenda. The progressive Democrats just can't accept it. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? This breakup is final. Republicans are moving on. We will pass this CR. We will keep America running. I urge progressive Democrats to join the rest of the nation. It's that, or they can keep screaming into the void, because America is not taking them back. The breakup is over. So leave the rabbit in the backyard alone. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlewoman is recognized.
Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, the distinguished Democratic leader, Mr. Jeffries.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank the distinguished gentlelady for her tremendous leadership and for yielding. I don't really understand the fatal attraction reference, because if anyone is dealing with fatal attraction, it's between President Trump and House Republicans. As soon as he says jump, your only answer is how high. It doesn't matter whether you are hurting the American people. That's why House Republicans are marching the country on a track toward the largest Medicaid cut in American history. You hurt children, hurt families, hurt Americans with disabilities, hurt seniors, close nursing homes and close hospitals. When Donald Trump says jump, extreme MAGA Republicans say how high. That's the fatal attraction. That's hurting the people of the United States of America. And by the way, the core promise that you made last year was about lowering costs. All you talked about was how you were going to lower the high cost of living. Democrats believe that America is too expensive. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Child care costs are too high. Utility costs are too high. And insurance costs are too high. America is too expensive. We believe that that, in fact, is the case. But Republicans have done nothing to lower the high cost of living. No bill, no executive order, no administrative action. That's the broken promise. We were told by President Trump that costs were going to go down on day one. Grocery prices haven't gone down, they've gone up. Inflation is up. You know what's going down? The stock market. Because President Trump and House Republicans are crashing the economy in real time and marching us to a possible Republican recession. That's what's confronting the American people. And so now we have this partisan, reckless spending bill that we're being asked to consider on the floor today. Bipartisan negotiations were underway. Rosa DeLauro was at the table, working to reach an agreement consistent with the Fiscal Responsibility Act that was passed by Republicans and Democrats and then signed into law in 2023. But when Donald Trump says jump, extreme MAGA Republicans say how high. And he ordered the Republicans to leave the negotiating table to try to jam this far-right extremist bill down the throats of the American people. There are so many challenges with this bill, too many to detail. But let me just articulate a few. The House Republican, highly partisan, shutdown threatening bill is an attack on veterans, it's an attack on families, it's an attack on seniors. It cuts funding for veterans, including billions of dollars in funds that will be cut from veterans in desperate need of health care for people who serve this country, who are suffering from painful exposure to toxic substances, Agent Orange, and burn pits. And this bill, before this House, cuts billions of dollars in that health care that is desperately needed. That's an attack on veterans. It's an attack on children and families in America because this bill cuts funding for nutritional assistance that would otherwise be available for everyday Americans to put food on the table. When people are already struggling because grocery prices aren't going down, they're going up under this administration. And yet, this Republican bill will cut funding for nutritional assistance. That's an attack on children and families here in America. It's an attack on seniors, an attack on everyday Americans, an attack on housing, an attack on health care, which cuts funds from things like Alzheimer's research to help older Americans battle these challenges. That's what this extreme Republican bill is all about. It will hurt families, hurt seniors, and hurt veterans. The second problem, equally troublesome, is that this bill does nothing to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We've been very clear. As Democrats, we look forward in this Congress to protecting these vitally important priorities for the American people. Why is the bill silent on these priorities? Because you are trying to set in motion a chainsaw to Social Security, a chainsaw to Medicare, and a chainsaw to Medicaid. Your other boss yesterday confirmed that when he said that these entitlement programs, as he called them, they're not entitlement programs, they are earned benefits. When you start to use the language of entitlement programs, it's because you're trying to set in motion an assault on Social Security and an assault on Medicare. They're saying the quiet part out loud. We know you're going after Social Security and Medicare because you've been firing thousands of people from the Social Security Administration. You want to collapse the system. And this bill does nothing to stop that. All it does is facilitate the collapsing of Social Security by dismantling the Social Security Administration. And of course, we know what's going on with your assault on Medicaid, $880 billion. Assaulting the health care of the American people. We've been very clear. We'll work together to protect Social Security, protect Medicare, protect Medicaid. You have no interest in doing that because you want to take a chainsaw to these priorities. And by the way, it has nothing to do with waste, fraud, and abuse. As Democrats, we've been very clear. We want to build a federal government, make sure that we have a federal government that's effective, that's efficient, and that's equitable, delivering services all across the country in a manner that spends taxpayer dollars wisely. But that's not what this effort is all about. This bill will unleash fury on the American people. It will facilitate the ongoing effort that is currently underway. The average Social Security recipient in this country receives $65 a day. They have to survive on $65 a day. But you want to take a chainsaw to Social Security. When Elon Musk and his tens of billions of dollars of government contracts essentially makes at least $8 million a day from the taxpayers. If you want to uncover waste, fraud, or abuse, start there. Don't start with the $65 a day that Social Security recipients receive from their earned benefits, from their hard work throughout their entire lives. Start there. Elon Musk is $8 billion a day feeding at the trough of the American taxpayer. This has nothing to do, this bill right here, with waste, fraud, and abuse. It's all part of a broader scheme to pass massive tax cuts for billionaire donors, the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, and then to stick working-class Americans with the bill. This entire scheme. And as Democrats, we want no part of it because we're fighting hard to make life better for everyday Americans, to make sure that when you work hard and play by the rules in the United States of America, you should be able to provide a comfortable living for yourself and for your family. Educate your children, purchase a home, have access to health care. Go on vacation every now and then. One day retire with grace and with dignity. That's the American dream. As House Democrats, we're fighting to preserve. This Republican shutdown bill does nothing to enhance the American dream. It undermines it. Which is why we are strongly opposed to this effort, part of a power grab from those who are unelected, unaccountable, unhinged, and then working at the direction of this administration, which again has done nothing to improve the economy, nothing to lower costs, nothing to make life better for everyday Americans. And this reckless Republican bill will make things worse. I was in Selma over the weekend. We had an opportunity to once again cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Think about the fact that John Lewis and Amelia Boykin Robinson and Hosea Williams and so many others, as they stood on that bridge, knew that there was trouble on the other side. But even though there was trouble on the other side, they believed that their cause was righteous, and it was. It was a just one. It was designed to make America the best version of herself. And we stand here today, standing on their shoulders, continuing that effort. How do we make sure that the American dream is alive and well for everyone in every corner of America, throughout every community? And that's what House Democrats will continue to fight for. That's why we oppose this bill, this effort to hurt families and veterans and seniors and children and everyday Americans. And so we're going to continue to show up. We're going to continue to stand up. We're going to continue to speak up for what is right. We oppose this bill. We oppose this partisan effort to hurt the American people. And we will continue to stand on the side of bringing the American dream to life for every single American. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Oklahoma. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I have great respect for the Democratic leader and certainly great respect and personal friendship for a distinguished ranking member of the Appropriations Committee. But I don't know what bill the leader read, but it certainly wasn't this bill. We've heard a lot of time about Social Security. There's nothing in this bill on Social Security, not a single thing. We heard a lot about Medicare. We don't deal with Medicare on the Appropriations Committee. It's not in here. We heard a lot about Medicaid. It's not in here either. If it'd be dealt with, it'll be dealt with in a reconciliation bill, but not this bill. This bill is about keeping the government open, something my friends pride themselves on and have often patted themselves on the back on. You got the opportunity to do it today, because that's all this bill does. It does a couple other interesting things. It actually, my friend said, we cut funds for food support. It doesn't do that. It actually adds $500 million to WIC. We said you cut support for housing. It doesn't do that. It actually adds money to the housing accounts. If you actually go through the bill, the charges made simply don't have much to do with what's in this bill. The simple reality is we're either going to keep the government open or we're going to shut it down. If you want to keep the government open, keep working on these problems, you vote yes. If you want to shut the government down, throw the country into chaos, you vote no. It's certainly the privilege of my friends on the other side to vote how they care to vote, but don't say there are things in this bill which simply are not there. That's just the fear-mongering of the worst sort. Frankly, again, I would just urge my friends to keep the government open. And by the way, just for the record, neither the President nor the Speaker ever asked me to leave the negotiating table, ever. Quite the opposite. The Speaker said, keep going, keep trying, keep at it. We are 4 days away from a shutdown. It was my friends that introduced a lot of things in the negotiations that aren't normally appropriations issues. Chose to do that. We couldn't come to a deal. We're pretty close on the top line number. We were right there. But we're not going to have a Republican Senate and a Republican House restrict a Republican president from the legitimate exercise of executive authority and then, oh, by the way, ask him to sign the bill. How do you think that's going to work out? That's not a very reasonable request. We resisted it. My friend Senator Collins, who was my negotiating partner from the Senate, resisted it. And we'll continue to resist it, and that's not going to happen. But this bill is about none of those things. This bill is about keeping the government open. You choose to shut it down, then that's your prerogative. You're allowed to do that. But I don't intend to do that. I don't think my colleagues on my side of the aisle intend to do that. And I would urge Democrats who actually read the bill to reflect on it and avoid shutting down the government as well and working with us in that regard. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman is recognized.
The President has no legitimate authority by the Constitution to insert himself into the appropriations process. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the distinguished ranking member of the Financial Services and General Government Subcommittee, Mr. Hoyer.
Gentleman's recognized.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I adopt all of what the leader said, notwithstanding the rebuttal from the chairman of our committee. This bill is about giving Trump more unfettered power. That's what this bill is about. This country is in crisis and chaos over the last 45 days plus days. And this bill will continue that process. The Congress, if it passes this bill, will have failed. We should have passed all of our bills by September 30th of last year. We didn't. We then passed, as some of the Republicans have said, some appropriation bills. All of them were partisan bills. This is a partisan bill. In a Congress that is that close, you would think that we would come together and work together. But one of our members said, if Trump says, pat our heads and jump up and down, that's what we'll do. Welcome to the pat our heads and jump up and down, CR. A CR is failure. The majority puts forth its partisan CR that helps this administration dismantle vital services for the American people, outlined by our leader, rejecting any guardrails on these illegal and unconstitutional actions by Mr. Musk and Mr. Trump. That chainsaw that they want to take to federal employees and the federal government. This bill requires the District of Columbia, for instance, to take a $1.1 billion cut, not out of federal funds, out of their own funds that they tax their people. It defunds the police. I wish I had more time to say how bad this bill is. Vote no.
Oklahoma is recognized.
Distinguished Republican Majority Leader, my good friend Steve Scalise of Louisiana.
Gentleman is recognized from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Oklahoma, the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Mr. Cole, for his leadership at helping negotiate a really important bill to keep government funded. As has been duly noted along the way, over these past year, roughly 6 months, this House, the last majority in the last Congress, passed over 70% of the government funding bills, Mr. Speaker. We passed them to the Senate, and back then, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats were in charge, and they chose not to pass a single House appropriations bill, not one. The House, under Republican majority, not always with help from the other side, but we still got it done on our own, passed over 70% of the government funding bills, and then eventually got to a point where we had to let the Senate try to get something done, which unfortunately they didn't, and then we got to the verge of a shutdown, and we said we are not going to let that happen, and we had a short-term funding bill. And here we are again, we're on the eve of another potential shutdown, and this Republican majority said we're not going to let that happen. In fact, this Republican president, Donald Trump, said we're not going to let that happen either. It would be irresponsible to have a government shutdown. And maybe it's because Donald Trump said he's for it that then the Democrat leadership decided they were going to be against it. And when did they decide they were going to be against this bill? Before the bill was even written. Before it was filed, they came out against it and started saying things that were in the bill when it wasn't even written, Mr. Speaker. You heard them talking about cuts to Medicare, cuts to veterans. The bill wasn't even written, and they were already making up stories to try to figure out how to vote no and shut the government down. That's sadly where this Democrat Party has gotten. The Democrat Party of today is a leaderless, rudderless ship. They don't have an agenda. You saw it at the State of the Union, Mr. Speaker, when you saw President Trump not only laying out his agenda that 77 million people, a majority of Americans, went to the polls to elect. The mandate that President Trump got, not just with a majority of Americans and a majority of the Electoral College, but all seven out of 7 swing states all voted for President Trump because they wanted that agenda implemented. And what irrates the Democrats the most? The fact that President Trump is following through on the promises that he made, actually doing the things he said he would do. He's securing the border. That was the #1 issue all across this country. No matter which state you went to, people wanted a secure border, and he's following through on it. And yet the Democrat Party is criticizing him for doing that part of his job. Rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in government, something that should be bipartisan. In fact, it used to be bipartisan to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. But now because Donald Trump is doing it, the Democrat Party of today up here in Washington is so consumed with hatred that they oppose even rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. That has been not only highlighted up here but people around the country are talking about getting rid of that waste once they've seen it. A lot of this was a veil that was pulled down where people couldn't even find out what was going on because the payment systems were being hidden by the Biden administration. We couldn't even find out about a lot of that spending that we were anecdotally hearing about. But finally, you saw it on full display. And it was so embarrassing that some of those employees have left. Fortunately, a lot of that taxpayer money that was being wasted is now being saved. And the money is being recouped so that we can shore up programs that work vitally for people. The president talked about Social Security, a program that we help protect. When you've got somebody that's listed as 300 years old in the Social Security system, that shows you the kind of fraud and abuse that's going on. And the fact that President Trump is willing to confront that and take it on so that people actually paid into the program their whole lives can get the benefits they deserve. That's what people elected President Trump and this majority on the Republican side to do. But you would think Democrats would want to join in and help accomplish that. And yet here they are on this floor talking about things that aren't even in the bill, trying to scare people, talking about cuts to veterans in the bill, and maybe because they just didn't read the bill. It's only 99 pages long. I would urge them to go read it. They might actually vote for this bill in the next hour because they'll realize, in fact, the cuts that they're talking about are not true. They're not in the bill. There's an increase for veterans in this bill. You know what else is in this bill, Mr. Speaker? And I want to applaud again the chairman of the Appropriations Committee and his members for negotiating something that's been needed for a long time, and that is the largest pay raise for our junior enlisted military personnel in over 40 years. Now, if somebody doesn't think our men and women in uniform deserve that pay raise, maybe they'll vote no. I'm proud to say I'm going to be voting yes to support our men and women in uniform who've been waiting for that raise and deserve it. How can you justify a no vote on that, Mr. Speaker? That's actually in the bill. As they talk all day about what's not in the bill, because they were against it before it was even written, if they actually read this bill, again, only 99 pages, it's a pretty quick read, you would find out that pay raise for our troops is in the bill. Stronger funding for our veterans is in the bill. But why are they voting no, you would ask? Just because the name of the president is Donald Trump. I think the people of this country are fed up with that kind of hatred that consumes people here in Washington. Again, when you watch the State of the Union address, and the president is not even talking about his agenda, he's introducing and paying tribute to a 13-year-old boy who just beat cancer. And they couldn't even stand up and applaud that on their side because of the person who said it. If the hatred is so consuming that you can't even support what's great about America, maybe you need to reevaluate what's important in doing these jobs. We are elected to represent the people, and if the president, no matter who he is or she is, has a great idea, you support it. There were a lot of things about Barack Obama's policies I disagreed with, Mr. Speaker. Yet when he said something that was good for America at a State of the Union, I stood up. We actually worked with the president. The chairman was part of that, Chairman Cole, in passing the 21st Century Cures Act, last bill that Barack Obama signed, to help put more funding into NIH so we could cure major diseases. We protect those gains in this bill. But if they're advocating to vote no, they're advocating for a government shutdown. It's a binary choice. It's not like there's a plan B behind door number 2, Mr. Speaker. So if the plan is to vote no, what you're really saying is you want to shut down the government. And I know a lot of Democrats, we all get to bring a guest to the State of the Union. And they get to sit up in the balcony. You've got the First Lady and the President's guests up there. Again, the 13-year-old boy who beat cancer. The widow of a slain police officer who was in the balcony that they would not even applaud and pay tribute to. But they were there too, but everybody else got to bring a guest. Most Democrats bragged that they were bringing federal workers as their guests. You saw a lot of them holding rallies out in front of federal offices with federal employees, some of who hadn't shown up for work in 3 years since COVID, but they found their way to the office, not to work, but to protest. Democrats are about to vote to furlough all of those federal workers. Why? Not because of what's in the bill, They've been telling you stories that aren't even true about what's in the bill. They don't like it because of the name of the President of the United States. Aren't we bigger than that? Aren't we a better country than that, Mr. Speaker? This is our responsibility to get this job done and then turn the page and go to work. This is the business, frankly, of the Biden administration that we're cleaning up. And we all ought to join together and finish that and then come together and start a real appropriations process where we move not just 70% of the bills in the House and 0 in the Senate. And Senator Thune, to his credit, as the new majority leader, has vowed to actually work on a true appropriations process so we're not working at the midnight hour on CRs, but where we can actually have a full functioning appropriations process, something we haven't seen in this town in a long time. We have to first take care of yesterday's business before we can start on tomorrow's appropriations process. And so it's critical that we get this job done, not to vote to lay off and furlough all the federal workers, the TSA agents. You won't even be able to go to the airport or your favorite federal park if they got their way. Let's actually get our work done so we can start a 12-bill appropriations process that moves through the Senate too, where you can actually have a negotiation between two sides of the aisle. Again, something we haven't seen in a long time, but is long past due. It's a new day in America. And I applaud President Trump. And we had Vice President J.D. Vance this morning come and talk about the importance of passing this bill too, because they want to fix the problems of this nation. They want to fulfill the promises that were made during the campaign and follow through on the mandate that was given to President Trump, Vice President Vance, and this Republican majority in the House and Senate by 77 million people to turn this country around. Let's get back to being the greatest country in the history of the world. We can do it. We can come together and solve big problems. But we solve big problems by first taking care of the basics of government, and that's to keep the government open. Let's pass the CR. Let's see a big vote to do it too. I welcome both sides of the aisle. My friends on the other side, they can criticize a bill they've never read that wasn't even filed, but once they look at this bill, I think you might even see some of them vote yes as well. Let's get our work done, and let's move on to the next challenges that the American people expect us to deliver on for them. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentlelady is recognized.
The President did make a promise to drive down the cost of living. Instead, he's driven up prices. With that, I want to recognize and yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, the distinguished Democratic whip, Ms. Clark.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, and I thank the gentlelady from Connecticut for yielding. Republicans made a promise to the American people. We're going to build a stronger economy, we're going to lower costs, and we're going to have safer communities. But for 7 weeks, we have seen nothing but ideas and bills that break that promise. We all want government to run more efficiently, to be better for people who depend on it. But stealing money from the Veterans Administration, from schools, from law enforcement, from children's health care, and giving it to a tax cut to the wealthiest man on earth and his billionaire friends, that's not finding efficiencies. That's not taking on waste and fraud in government. It's destroying working families. The GOP are crushing the American people under the weight of their own political ambition. Rents are going up. Housing is in a crisis. This bill today, they propose to evict 32,000 families from their home. 32,000. Those are veterans. Those are kids. Those are seniors. Those are domestic violence survivors. Eggs at my grocery store on Sunday were $8.49 a dozen. In this bill, you propose to take $27 million away from the inspectors who go out to our chicken farms who are fighting and trying to stop bird flu that is causing the spike in eggs. What kind of insanity is that? And then if we look at the budget overall, we've got health care spiking, and you want to cut Medicaid. That's the answer? Seniors cost of living is out of control. And you're saying, let's run up the cost of prescription drugs. And as Elon told us directly this week, coming next, you want to eliminate Social Security. Give me more time. So if you feel this is the mandate that you have, you can do that on your own.
Time's expired. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to my very good friend and senior member of the Appropriations Committee, the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Simpson.
Gentleman's recognized.
I thank the chairman for yielding. And first, let me say I appreciate the work the chairman has done over the last several months, trying to get our regular appropriation bills done and then trying to get this CR finished when it became apparent we weren't going to be able to negotiate a top line yet. Something that we will continue to work on. But there's a lot of things that have been said on this floor that I have to say just aren't true. Not a different interpretation of the facts. They're just not true. There's nothing in here that cuts Social Security. There's nothing in here that cuts Medicare. There's nothing in here that cuts Medicaid. But yet I keep hearing that. That's the talking points that were created before this bill was actually written. It is difficult to write a year-long CR. First time I can remember it being done. It's almost harder writing that than it is writing the regular appropriation bills because we have to put anomalies in it. Things that have to be done as we move on with the regular funding. The reason I've been able to support this CR and will vote for it is because of the work that our chairman, Mr. Cole, has done with some of these anomalies that were absolutely necessary. In the interior arena, there were 4 anomalies that really needed to be addressed to get this CR done. One is it fully funds PILT payments, which is an estimated level of $600 million, $85 million above what was the current level. In Indian country, the CR increases funding for Indian health services to expand availability and direct health care services, funding the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, BIE programs are held at 2024 enacted levels. The CR removes the 2024 earmarks with BIA and HIS, but the overall net effect on tribal programs is still a $25 million increase. In addition, program increases, the CR also provides $999 million an increase for tribal contract support costs and an additional $256 million for Section 105(1) leases in an effort to continue our commitment to upholding our trust and treaty responsibilities. It also increases on a permanent basis the wildfire fighting fire pay. That costs $147 million. It actually saves us $27 million rather than just extending the one-year extension of the wildfire pay. And I think when we've seen those great jobs that wildfire fighters do for us, it's incredible what they do. We don't pay them enough now. And if you can make more flippin' burgers in California than you can fighting wildfires, then something's wrong. So this permanently fixes that for us. It's a very important bill. Shutting down government is never good policy. It's never good politics. Why anyone, Republican or Democrat, would vote against this, I have no idea. This is a good bill. I hope we all vote for it.
Gentlewoman is recognized from Connecticut.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Ohio, the distinguished ranking member of the Energy and Water Subcommittee, Ms. Capter.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the ranking member, DeLauro, for allowing me this time. This bill was drafted by Musk's greed machine and seeks to put its claws even deeper into the pockets of our people. Why? To extract the largest transfer of wealth from money they're taking from these bills, from middle class and working class people, and put it in the pockets of the top 1% who already own half of this country, a handful of people. so very wealthy. The top 1% of billionaires now own as much wealth as the bottom half of our population. That's what's going wrong, and I rise in strong opposition to this bill. Elon Musk and his Doge boys don't need Medicaid, Social Security, veterans benefits. Our Constitution assigns our legislative branch the responsibility to direct federal spending, not unelected billionaires and the 1%. In our subcommittee area of energy and water development, this Musk bill would stifle American prosperity by cutting nearly half of the Army Corps' budget. Musk and Trump don't know anything about public works and how essential the Army Corps is to our daily life in every district in this country and to economic growth. The greed machine wants to steal assets from America's people and put them in the pockets of billionaires at places like Mar-a-Lago. Oh, did I say that right? Mar-a-Lago, yeah. Okay. Now, finally, the greed machine is cutting a total of nearly $600 million in support for local law enforcement. That's nearly $600 million in cuts of local police, leaving the kitty dry. The greed machine is underfunding our local police. In opposing the bill, I stand with our people, not with the billionaires and their greed machine. Think about it. Why rob Main Street to dole out even bigger tax breaks and more contracts for the Mar-a-Lago crowd and billionaires whose crew haven't got a clue what working life is like for American men and women? It's overtime for them to pay their fair share. Vote no on this horrendous bill, and I yield back.
Time's expired. Gentleman's recognized from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished gentleman from Florida and member of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Rutherford.
Mr. Rutherford, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you yielding, and, you know, I really appreciate all the hard work that got us here today. You know, Mr. Speaker, I have to tell you, as I sat here on this floor listening to the conversation, it reminded me of an old saying that my father had for many, many years. I heard this, that a lie can travel around the world 3 times before the truth can get up and put its pants on. Well, that was before the internet. So now, after what I've heard today, I would say it's probably more like 100 times a lie can travel around the world before the truth can get up and put its pants on. And I happen to know that House Republicans have been working diligently to fully fund the core federal government services so that President Trump and his administration can continue to identify the waste, fraud, and abuse of American tax dollars, protect our border, and support Americans, including our veterans, contrary to what you heard, our military families, first responders, of which I'm a former, and our seniors. Most importantly, by passing H.R. 1986, this continuing resolution, we are ensuring that a costly government shutdown does not fall upon the American public. It's our constitutional obligation in Congress to fund the federal government, and House Republicans are acting on that duty. Unfortunately, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are not. House Democrat leadership came out in opposition to this bill and spread egregious falsehoods about what this bill does and does not do before it was even printed. You've heard that before. Let's be clear, this bill will not hurt law enforcement by slashing cops' grants, nor will it zero out the Toxic Exposure Fund for veterans. Instead, it's a clean bill that will extend funding and certainty for the American people. This bill would maintain government operations while responsibly cutting spending.
Gentleman, additional 30 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Protect Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare recipients from unnecessary disruption and the confusion that comes along with a government shutdown. Promote public safety, renew our commitment to supporting law enforcement officers, raise pay for our junior enlisted troops by the largest amount in 40 years, fund important nutritional assistance for mothers, infants, and children, and the list goes on. White House Democrats seem dead set on shutting down the government over their disdain for the commander-in-chief. no matter the cost to their own communities, and I am committed to passing this bill, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, the distinguished ranking member of the Defense Subcommittee, Ms. McCollum.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this full-year continuing resolution. Let's call the CR what it is. It's a Republican majority abdicating our constitutional responsibilities. Republicans have turned over congressional power to direct funding to Elon Musk and President Trump. The Republican appropriations process for fiscal year 2025 has been a disaster. Republicans have had 18 months to write, pass, and negotiate these spending bills. They failed. The Republican leadership never wanted to negotiate with Democrats with their slim majority in the House. Would have required. So here we are stuck with a full-year CR, something that's never happened in the history of this nation. It's a complete failure to govern. Making things worse, the CR cuts $13 billion from domestic priorities that Americans rely on. I'll mention a few, like life-saving medical research at the NIH. Rent assistance for low-income working families are cut. Republicans failed to include $22 billion in advanced appropriation funding for the VA Toxic Exposure Fund. This jeopardizes the health of our veterans exposed to burn pits and, yes, Agent Orange. Community projects submitted by our constituents for police and first responders have also been eliminated by this bill. Due to the Defense Department, the bill reduces DoD medical research by about 50%. It will obstruct the search for new cures for cancer and infectious diseases. Republicans also underfunded military training exercises, which will mean the readiness for our troops will be put at risk. They cut DoD technology research and development funding, which helps us keep our edge over our adversaries. Simply put, this CR is a disaster, and it did not have to be this way. The American people deserve better, and I urge my colleagues to vote no on this Republican failure.
Gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend and fellow member from Oklahoma, distinguished member of the Appropriations Committee, Ms. Weiss.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1968, a clean continuing resolution which funds government through September 30, 2025. I think my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are confused about what is in this bill and what is not. They keep talking about impacts to mandatory spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. That is not in this bill. Just because you keep repeating the same dishonest talking points doesn't make it true. This legislation continues funding and prevents a government shutdown, which would have a devastating impact on my home state of Oklahoma and communities across the country. We must keep government open so we can continue the America First agenda, which is focused on securing our border, unleashing American energy, safeguarding our nation, and rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. This legislation fully supports our vets and service members. It does not cut 1 cent from the toxic exposure funds or eliminate COPS grants. Continuing resolutions are not ideal, but we cannot allow for the distractions of a government shutdown, which is why I support this bill. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, the distinguished ranking member of the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee, Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this cruel betrayal of America's veterans, seniors, and working families. This one-year CR doesn't make rent or health care bills more affordable, which is what keeps my constituents up at night. Instead, it actually cuts housing aid that could force 32,000 veterans, domestic violence survivors, seniors, and people with disabilities into homelessness. And what does this spending patch do as we all now stare down the barrel of another Trump recession? It hands an unelected billionaire free rein to keep stealing taxpayers' dollars and paves the way for billionaires and big corporations to luxuriate in more tax breaks. This isn't a clean CR. This CR stands for cut and run. It lets Trump close hundreds of Social Security offices and fire thousands of workers who deliver our seniors checks. It allows Musk to keep hacking into your private tax data. It puts critical Everglades restoration funds at risk. Worst of all, it lets Trump and Musk keep up their brutal assault on veterans and the people who care for them. It does it by eliminating $23 billion in guaranteed funding for health care for veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxins. We should debate bipartisan full-year funding bills that grow the economy and provide vital resources Americans need. Instead, this Republican cut-and-run bill turns Congress into a missing kid on a milk carton and cedes massive power to Trump. This is the same president who, in 2 short months, tanked your 401k and unleashed a job-killing trade war. Yesterday, the stock market just recorded its worst day since 2020. What really enrages me is that this cut-and-run bill sides with the most anti-veteran president in American history. Trump has fired 6,000 veterans, inflicted mass VA layoffs, and killed hundreds of veteran services contracts. Trump even plans to lay off another 83,000 VA workers, and on top of that, this cut-and-run bill makes even deeper cuts to the health care services for all those who bravely served our nation. Democrats are more than willing to back bipartisan funding legislation, but we will never sell out our seniors, veterans, and children like this cut-and-run bill shamelessly does. I yield back. Vote no.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my good friend, distinguished member of the Rules Committee, and gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
Gentleman is recognized.
I thank my friend from Oklahoma. My, how times have changed. How many times have we been sitting on the floor of the House listening to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle saying, a CR is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We must have the CR. Because when some of us were saying, wait a minute, Mr. President, wait a minute, President Biden, maybe we should actually secure the border of the United States instead of letting millions of people flood in and kill Americans and let fentanyl flow into our communities. So when we wanted to secure the border and we dared to say that the funding should actually reflect that, and we threatened to, hey, maybe we should actually have a fight on spending, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle said, CR, we got to have a CR, our precious CR. Well, here we are. And what are we doing? Our colleagues oppose the CR. Why? Because we would have spending frozen for 6 months, down about $7 billion, but importantly, allow DOGE and allow our friends in the administration to continue to expose the absurdity of federal spending. How about $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, inclusion in Serbia's workplaces? $70,000 for production of a DEI musical in Ireland. $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. This is what our Democratic colleagues are fighting for, to continue to fund absurd programs rather than do the common sense work of what we're trying to do, to have more beds for ICE, secure the border of the United States, ensure that our defense is funded, ensure that we're able to hold spending in check so we can actually have a chance of saving this great country. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
The gentleman confirms what we've been saying all along, impoundment. I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Maine, the distinguished ranking member of the Interior and Environment Subcommittee, Ms. Pingree.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much to the ranking member for yielding me this time. I oppose this full-year continuing resolution and urge my colleagues to reject it. If we vote no and reject this CR, we can go back to work and negotiate a regular full-year spending bill. This full-year continuing resolution is not a responsible way to govern. The bill does not set funding levels for individual programs, and because it doesn't, it creates another dangerous opportunity for President Trump and Elon Musk to defund congressional priorities. And we all know what a disaster that has been for our country, an illegal, unconstitutional disaster. It is the duty of Congress to negotiate regular spending bills. This means that we actively decide on every individual program's funding level, and we make adjustments where necessary. For example, the Indian Health Service needs an additional $345 million just to maintain current direct health care services. This continuing resolution fails to provide those funds, so tribal communities will experience a lower level of health care service. A regular bill also gives very specific directions to agencies to carry out specific work. For example, in prior years, in the Interior Bill, we have directed the EPA to conduct PFAS research that will help farmers, ranchers, and rural communities manage the disastrous impact PFAS has had in places like my home state of Maine. Under this continuing resolution, without our direction, this administration may decide that work should stop. As ranking member of the Interior and Environment Appropriations Subcommittee, I'm deeply concerned that the Republican majority is giving the administration a free pass to abandon programs that protect the